Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Shadana.
Hello everyone, welcome to Embedded Safety and Security Summit. I'm Sadhna and today I'm here to discuss about checklists to build a safer RTOS based embedded system quickly. So what are we going to look on this? So first, why do we need a checklist and how does it help us in terms of software quality, development time and development cost? And then what are solid principles and how is it helpful in software development as the embedded industry is more fond of C++ than C nowadays? Then what are design patterns and why do we need it? At the end, I'll be sharing a few debugging and performance analysis techniques which I found useful for myself. So first, why do we need a checklist? Checklist helps us to improve the quality of the software. As far as medical industry is concerned, the quality of the software is very much important because a small, simple mistake could cost a life. So the quality of software is very important. We should be able to provide a bug-free software, and then we have to reduce the development time. Actually, the time to market is a very important factor in case of medical devices. We should be able to develop the product within a defined timeline, and it should be able to hit the market when there is a need. And then at last, obviously, we all need a qualified product with better reasonable price. So the development cost has to be put in check then and there when we proceed towards the end of the project. So based on all these aspects, I'd like to suggest a few things for software development here. So the first thing is solid principles, and what solid stands for: single responsibility principle, open close principle, Liskov substitution principle, interface segregation, and dependency inversion. I think it will be good to look deeper into each of these principles with an example. So let us move into single responsibility principle. So what does this mean? A class should have only one reason to change, meaning that a class should have only one job. So it will be better if we could see through this and see with an example. So here I have an example in which I'm using a sensor in one of my application. So as soon as sensor comes into picture, I have to read the data, and then I have to process the sensor data and give some meaningful output to the user. So that is what is going to happen in my application. So here is the proposed design. So I have a sensor application which consists of read data, process data, and display data. And I have all these things combined into one single entity. So does this satisfy single responsibility principle? No, because it does not do one single job here. My application has read data, process data, display data. It is doing three different things, and it has many other reasons to change. So what could be a better design is I have a separate read data module, separate process data, and a separate display data. So this satisfies single responsibility principle. So why do I need such a principle, and why do my code has to go through this? So it's because we have a lot of benefits here. So I'd like to list a few benefits here. The first one is code reusability. Let us consider the read data and display data thing. Every sensor has to be read, and obviously we'll be displaying the information. Suppose we use the same sensor across products, the process data could vary based on the application, but this reading part will not change based on the application. So this could be used across products. So this promotes code reusability. And the next one is it reduces the code complexity. Code complexity plays a very much important role in case of testing also. For example, let us consider unit testing. So when we do unit testing for any particular section of code, we just write test cases, and it will be generating, the tool will be generating some instrumented code. When we consider the sensor application, we have to feed in a large set of data to mimic the real-time analysis of the sensor application. So in that case, I have a large set of data. And if all my code is into a single module, I'll have a very large instrumented file. And if I have a target which has very less memory capability, then I'll be under trouble. So in that case, if I have separate entities like this, it will be very helpful for us to proceed with testing. So these are some of the benefits on using solid principles. Not only the SRP principle, but these benefits are applicable to all the solid principles. So the next one is open close principle. Objects and entities should be open for extension but closed for modification. Again, let us look into the sensor application. So again, I have to read the data from the sensor and process the data from data which I have read and give some information. But here, suddenly I was asked to add one other feature called display data. So now I'll be adding it to my read data and process data. I initially had only read data and process data, and suddenly I was to add a new feature which is displaying, and I've added it into my data. Now this has this satisfied open close principle? No, because here it should be open for extension and closed for modification, which means we should not modify the existing code and we should try to extend the existing code. Like I have a separate one for read data and process data. Now I add a separate entity for display data. So here I have extended my application, but I haven't modified my application. So this is what open close principle says. And the benefits are, as I told earlier, the benefits which I told code reusability, code complexity issues, all those are applicable for all the solid principles. So let us look into only the principle and examples. Okay, so the next one is Liskov substitution principle. So every subclass or derived class should be substitutable for their base or parent class. Let's go into the example directly. I think most of you are aware of abstract class, but for the benefit of everyone, I would like to explain what an abstract class is. So an abstract class consists of some common behavior which can be inherited by subclass without having to implement the entire class again. So, okay, if it would be better if we could go through the example. So I have a class called peripheral. So this is my base class. So, and also this is an abstract class because I just have certain things which are very essential for peripherals. For any peripheral, we can read data from that. We can set clock frequency for that. So I have certain things common for all the peripherals. Now let us consider peripherals like specific peripherals like UART, ADC, I2C, and SPI. So these peripherals they all come under a broader picture of peripheral, but they have their separate implementation. So what I have done here is I have the read data function as a virtual function, which means I can have a separate implementation for those functions in my derived class. So in the next, we have a class called UART class, which is derived from the peripheral class. And I can implement the read data function here, wherein I receive the data from the UART. Similarly, for ADC, the read data function will have implementation, which is to receive data from the UART. So these are implementations of base class and derived class. Now I should be able to substitute this derived class for the peripheral, for the base class. So how do we do that? Here I have created an instance of peripheral class with UART class. So I was able, why I have substituted the peripheral class with the UART classes. My peripheral class is an abstract class which does not have the clear implementation for all the functions which it has. Whereas my UART class has implementation for all the essential functions. So I'm able to substitute my base class with the derived class. So this satisfies Liskov substitution principle. So the next one is interface segregation principle. A client should never be forced to implement an interface that it doesn't use, or the client shouldn't be forced to depend on methods they do not use. So directly, let's go on into the example. So I have an UI for an application which can be used in both desktop and smartphones. Now, when I implement the application, things come to my mind, or like I have to have an implementation for mouse click, mouse over, double tap, and swipe. But when I consider a desktop application, I might not need double tap and swipe. But when I consider my smartphone application, I might not use mouse click or mouse over. So in this case, if I give this whole application to my client, I might not satisfy my interface segregation principle because I'm giving some of the features which are not required by the clients. So what is the proposed solution here is we have to segregate our application into two parts, which is one is desktop application and the other is smartphone application, where desktop will have only mouse click and mouse over and smartphone application will have double tap and swipe. Now this satisfies my interface segregation principle. My client isn't getting anything which they don't need. So this satisfies the principle. The next one is dependency inversion principle. Entities must depend on abstractions and not on concretions, which means the high level module must not depend on the low level module. So let me go into the example. So now I have a remote monitoring application, which means I have a remote application which monitors a set of data and sends an alert message to the user when there is something abnormal has been detected by the application. So what I do is I need a monitoring application and I need some interface to send that message to the user. So I have some SMS feature here. So, but this is a tightly coupled code. Say, suppose if I don't want SMS feature and I want to move on to email, then I have to do a hell lot of modifications in my application, and my high level module also will get affected because of those changes. So I should not have a tightly coupled code like this. So what can I do is I can separate my high level module and low level module and have my high level module independent of my low level things. So what happens here is I have separated my monitoring application alone and I have my communication interface separately, which consists of email, SMS. Maybe in future, if I want, I can add another feature like through WhatsApp, I should get the data. So such things could be added into my communication interface. Here, the high level module, that is my monitoring application, will just have to tell me which interface it has to take, but whereas it doesn't worry how it sends. All those implementations need not be taken care about my high level modules. So these are the solid principles. I hope it is very clear. And so let me move on to RTOS now. So I think most of you are aware of what an RTOS is and what is the scheduler due and what are the scheduling principles. So with that expectation, I move on to the next things like need for RTOS based system. Why do we need RTOS based system? Some of us we just take embedded systems. Oh, then let's go to RTOS and implement it. But most of us don't know what problem does RTOS solves. So the problem which RTOS solves mainly is concurrency. So what's concurrency? I have okay. Let me go with an example. I have an two LEDs now, and I want one LED to toggle for every 1 millisecond, and I want another LED which glows when I press some button. So this is my expectation. But do you think this could work properly without an RTOS based system? Will we be able to achieve concurrency in this? No, because only after execution of one function, we will be able to execute the other one without concurrency. So we won't be able to do that without RTOS based system. So to achieve our concurrency, RTOS is the best thing which we have in our hand. But RTOS just gives an impression that all the tasks runs concurrently, wherein it executes only one task at a time. So this is the very important thing for which we need an RTOS based system. And then there are a few benefits of using all these things. Using the RTOS. So the first and foremost thing is our CPU will be put into more effective usage, and then we'll be able to segregate our code into simpler sections, and the complexity of the code will be reduced. And obviously, if complexity is reduced, all our further effects like testing efforts and all will be reduced. So these are some of the benefits. And our RTOS code could be a killer because there are few important challenges which we could face. These challenges should be taken care very importantly. I have listed out a few challenges here. Those are race conditions, deadlock, priority inversion, and unresponsive threads. These could be very serious when these are put into the system. So we should be very aware to check for these conditions. So how do we do all these things? How to avoid the problems? So I have a few suggestions to avoid these problems. First, use of solid principles. I think we have seen in detail about this, and use of proper thread-to-thread communication. Okay, now I have an art task. I have different threads. I have segregated my tasks. My task does only one job at a time. Okay, I have used solid principles. Now, how do my thread-to-thread communication happen? So if we don't have a proper thread-to-thread communication, again, our code is going to be a mess. So it is always recommended to use queue or message buffers to for thread-to-thread communication, and then thread to be blocked at only one place of the code. So which means the thread has to be blocked at only one location, which where it is intended to be blocked. We shouldn't have multiple places where the code could get blocked, because then if we face any issues in the later stages, it will be very difficult for us to find where the thread has gone unresponsive. So this has to be taken care. And use of templates. So templates are nothing but blueprints which are pre-written and pre-tested, and we can just take them and put it into our code so that the development time and cost reduces drastically. And then memory protection units to be implemented. So memory protection units are used to protect memory regions by defining specific access permissions for each task and peripheral. This is mainly used to protect critical sections of memory so that any unauthorized task or unauthorized peripheral will not be able to access that particular critical section of memory. So for that, we need memory protection units. And it is always good to set metrics for our development. So this varies for person to person and company to company. So here, I would like to suggest a few metrics here. Always check for the cyclomatic complexity of each function and set a particular level for that. And it is good to go over the test coverage reports and always go through the bug reports, and we so that we'll get a clear idea where the problem arises and how it could be fixed for a longer run. And at last, the container environments are now getting more popular just to avoid the environment dependencies. So, what is this container? So it is nothing but just we have a virtual machine where we could put in a container, and inside the container we will have all the tools essential for one particular project. The development tools, the testing tools, everything can put into one particular container, and all the developers should use the tools only from the container environment so that this avoids environment dependencies. Environment dependencies in the sense, we have multiple developers working in a single project, and like one developer could work with one version of the same software, and whereas another one could work on different version of the same software. Now what happens when we merge the code? There could be some conflicts. So in order to avoid all those environment dependencies, we can use container environments. So, and the next important thing to which could be a solution to avoid the problems is design patterns. So what is a design pattern? A design pattern is a general repeatable solution to a commonly occurring problem in software design. So what does this mean? Who has given this design patterns? So design patterns are some solutions which were found effective by experienced software designers. So software designers who also found similar problems and they found a better solution for it. They have proposed some patterns for that. So it will be very useful in reducing the development time and cost if we could pick up the correct design pattern. So the useful design patterns, actually there are a lot of design patterns here, but I'd like to suggest a few things which are dependent for hardware dependent design patterns. So those are hardware adapter, publish, subscribe, interrupt, and polling patterns. I'll just go over one example. There are systems which are based on which are time driven systems and which are event driven systems. So my time driven systems will be working in my polling method. That is, I define a particular time, and each and every time after that particular time, I will go and check for some data. So that is polling. Whereas for event-driven methods, when a particular event happens, I trigger an interrupt and I do something which has to be done. So those are interrupt patterns. So there are a lot of patterns available for a particular software design. So before starting a design, we could go and check for design patterns which will be applicable for our application. So out of after looking into all these things, one of the preferred solution which I use is like I have a separate application layer which is at the top, and I have separated my drivers and hardware abstraction layers away from my application, and both supported packages separately, and I have my RTOS and wrappers for RTOS. Why do I need wrappers for my RTOS? My RTOS is a third party software who could upgrade their software continuously. So when I have to use my latest version of RTOS, now again, if I have used my RTOS directly into my application, I have to change my entire application. But whereas if I have wrappers in between, I can just modify only the wrappers, whereas my application will be left untouched. So this is one of the proposed solution which I feel has reduced the complexity. I'll suggest a few debugging techniques when your code goes crazy. And here are few things which we have to check. The first one is stack size, the task priority, and the interrupt priority. Only if we have a good, correct stack size and proper task priority and interrupt priority, our application runs without any problem. So how can we check all these things? We can use trace analyzers. So I'll explain you in detail what a trace analyzer means along with the performance analysis. So always use trace analyzers for performance analysis also. So there are a few vendors like SystemView, Perceptio for trace analyzers. And what should we look inside a trace analysis? So we have these factors to be considered in for an RTOS based application. So you should check for the runtime of each task, how much CPU load is being taken for each task, what is the memory usage. These are very important factors for performance analysis. So I'd like to show an example here. So I used ADC with using interrupt method and polling method, and using trace analyzers, I was able to find out that interrupt method was more efficient when I use almost 15 or 16 tasks along with this ADC task. So how did I find? So this is the code which I use for interrupt method and polling method, wherein I just start the conversion for the ADC, and once it gets completed, I'm just reading the data. So I used a trace analyzer to record my trace when using the polling method. So here you could see the ADC task uses almost 88% of my CPU load, which means after some time my code is going to get crashed because already my ADC has taken 88% of load for only one task, which is my ADC. And if you could see, my ADC task keeps on running for more time. So then I switched to interrupt mode, and now if you could see, only 0.01% of my CPU load is being taken by my ADC task. And also, if you could see the trace time slice, it is clearly visible that ADC task doesn't take much time now. So it is always recommended to use trace analyzers to check for the performance analysis of the RTOS based application. So the next one will be testing and certifications. So testing and certification is very, very essential for any device, and that too, in particular for medical devices, it is very essential. So what are the testings which we go through essentially? So requirement verification, which means I have a requirement and I have to connect it with my source code. At the end, it should be mapped to my test cases so that it has been developed and it will be tested. So that is requirement verification. And how do I do all these verifications? So there you have LDRA, through which we can test all our requirements. See, for example, the requirement traceability helps us here to for the requirement verification. And design verification and requirement based testing involves unit testing, coverage analysis, unit integration testing, and system integration testing. All these could be taken care of tools like LDRA. And at the end, we software should satisfy MISRA C or AUTOSAR C++ standards based on the programming language which we use. And being medical devices, we should satisfy IEC 62304. So for all the testing related activities, we could use any tool like LDRA. Here we have requirement traceability, coding standard compliance, code coverage analysis, and unit testing, unit integration testing. Everything will be taken care by the tool, which reduces our development time. So to summarize, we just saw about solid principles and its applications, best practices to be followed to develop scalable and flexible RTOS-based embedded applications, role of design patterns in reducing the time for software development lifecycle, debugging techniques and performance analysis for RTOS-based embedded applications, use of trace analyzers, testing and certifications, and with the use of qualified tools. So that's it. Thank you.